You were judged before you spoke, not loudly, not publicly, quietly, permanently. The moment something was said about you that you felt the urge to correct, the moment you noticed a look linger too long, a tone flatten a pause, where respect should have been, you were already placed somewhere lower than you expected. Nothing dramatic happened, no confrontation, no open attack, just a subtle shift, and suddenly you felt the pressure to explain. That impulse did not come from confidence, it came from exposure. You felt it in your body before you formed the words, a tightening, a need to clarify, to straighten the record, to make sure you were understood correctly. You told yourself it was maturity, transparency, honesty, but beneath it was something simpler, a reflex to recover position. And that reflex is where power leaks out. The world does not punish people for being wrong. It punishes them for appearing uncertain. The instant you move to defend your intent, you signal that intent matters more than outcome. The instant you rush to explain, you confirm that the judgment landed. The moment you try to correct perception, you accept that perception outranks you. Niccolò Machiavelli discovered this long before modern language softened it. He saw that those who explain invite scrutiny, and scrutiny is never neutral, it is hierarchical. When someone feels entitled to judge you and you respond with urgency, you have already acknowledged the imbalance. You may have felt this in small moments. Someone reframes your words casually, and you rush to clarify. Someone implies fault without evidence, and you volunteer context. Someone misinterprets your silence, and you break it too quickly. Each time you believe you are correcting misunderstanding. In reality, you are teaching others how to position you. Machiavelli observed that power rarely announces itself. It waits. It watches who feels compelled to speak. The one who fills silence first reveals where they stand. The one who rushes to be understood reveals dependence on approval. And dependence, once detected, becomes leverage. This is not cruelty. It is structure. Most people believe respect is earned through explanation. That if you just say enough, clearly enough, reasonably enough, the truth will land, and order will be restored. Machiavelli understood this was backwards. Order is not restored by truth. Truth is allowed once order is established. When you explain too quickly, you collapse distance. When you collapse distance, you collapse authority. Machiavellian rules reveal that authority requires opacity, not confusion, but restraint. What is fully visible can be fully handled. You were not wrong to notice the imbalance. You were not imagining it, but the mistake was believing that speaking would fix it. Machiavelli decoded the courts of power by watching who survived accusations and who vanished. It was never the most honest who endured. It was the most controlled. Those who did not defend themselves impulsively forced others to sit with uncertainty. And uncertainty is uncomfortable. People resolve discomfort by elevating the silent, not the pleading. There is a reason silence unsettles. It withholds confirmation. It denies closure. Machiavelli captured this as a form of dominance that does not need force. When you do not rush to explain, others must decide whether their judgment stands without your participation. Most are not confident enough to carry that weight. You may have been taught that clarity is kindness, that transparency builds trust. Machiavelli understood this only applies among equals. When hierarchy is in question, clarity offered too soon becomes confession. Trust is not built downward. What feels like moral responsibility is often positional surrender. You did not lose power because someone disrespected you. You lost power because you tried to repair the disrespect instead of letting it reveal itself. Machiavelli figured this out watching rulers fall not to enemies, but to their own urgency. They spoke when waiting would have protected them. They explained when silence would have forced recalibration. This is where awareness begins, not with anger, not with confrontation, with recognition. You are not required to rush toward understanding. You are not obligated to dissolve every tension. Some tensions exist to show you where you stand. Machiavelli once said in essence that those who fear being misunderstood are already negotiating from weakness. The moment you stop chasing clarity, the structure shifts, not outwardly, internally, and internal shifts are the only ones that last. Before anything changes around you, something must change in how quickly you respond. That is not withdrawal, it is control, and once control returns inward, the world adjusts quietly without being asked. The pattern is never loud. That is why it works. It shows up in moments so ordinary they escape confrontation. A message answered slower than before. A meeting where your name is skipped. A decision announced after it was already made. No accusation, no explanation. Just a quiet repositioning where you realize you are no longer central. And again, the instinct rises to address it. You consider sending the follow-up, clarifying your role, reasserting your contribution. You replay the moment in your head, refining words that sound reasonable, calm, cooperative. You tell yourself you're protecting relationships. What you are actually doing is volunteering evidence against your own position. Machiavelli observed that power is rarely taken. It is usually surrendered in small, polite increments. The moment you act as though something must be fixed, you confirm that something has slipped, and once that slip is acknowledged, others adjust accordingly. Look closely at how disrespect truly operates. It does not arrive as hostility. It arrives as familiarity. A casual tone where formality once existed. Assumptions made without consulting you. Your reliability quietly reclassified as availability. You are not attacked. You are absorbed. Machiavellian rules reveal that absorption is more dangerous than opposition. Opposition keeps boundaries intact. Absorption dissolves them. Once boundaries fade, so does leverage. You may recognize the sequence: first appreciation, then expectation, then entitlement, and finally invisibility. Each stage feels reasonable when it happens. Together, they form a transfer of power that requires no permission, only your continued cooperation. Machiavelli decoded this dynamic centuries ago by watching courts reward loyalty until it became predictable. Predictability once established was exploited. Those who could be counted on were counted out of real influence. Those who remained slightly unreadable retained authority. This is not because they were cruel. It is because they were scarce. Notice how quickly value is reassessed when access changes. When the person who always responds pauses. When the one who always agrees withholds. When the reliable presence becomes intermittent. The room recalibrates without discussion. No explanation is requested. The shift is felt. Machiavelli understood this recalibration instinctively. He saw that people respect what they cannot immediately command. Availability feels generous. Restraint feels powerful. Consider betrayal that never announces itself. A conversation you are not included in. A decision that moves forward without your input. When you discover it later, the damage is already done. If you confront it emotionally, you confirm the other party's freedom to act without you. If you explain your hurt, you provide them comfort, relief that the imbalance is manageable. Machiavelli once said in effect that injuries must either be severe or non-existent. Partial reactions invite repetition. When you respond with explanation instead of adjustment, you invite the pattern to continue. This is why silence feels uncomfortable at first. It denies resolution. It leaves others alone with their actions. Machiavelli captured this as a form of control that requires no confrontation. You do not accuse. You do not pursue. You simply alter your availability. And suddenly, the dynamic that felt fixed begins to move. Being used for kindness follows the same structure. Your willingness becomes assumed. Your reliability becomes expected. Your competence becomes a resource others manage, not because they planned it, but because you allowed uninterrupted access. Machiavelli figured this out watching those who served too well. They believed loyalty guaranteed safety. It did not. It guaranteed utility. Utility has an expiration date. Power does not announce its withdrawal. It simply stops compensating. When you cease explaining, cease justifying, cease smoothing over discomfort, something shifts. People begin to measure their words again. They pause. They reassess. This is the escalation most never reach. They notice the pattern, but try to fix it through communication. Communication does not restore position. Position restores communication. Machiavelli observed that those who remained composed while being overlooked often regained influence without asking. Not because others became kinder, but because the absence of reaction created uncertainty. And uncertainty, when unresolved, bends toward respect. You are not required to confront every slight. You are not obligated to preserve every bridge in real time. Some structures reveal their weakness only when weight is removed. The moment you stop trying to be included, inclusion becomes negotiable again. And that quiet reversal is where the balance begins to tilt back, without a word being spoken. There comes a moment when the pattern stops feeling personal and starts feeling mechanical. It is not that people suddenly changed. It is that the rules you were playing by were never the ones being used. Once you see this, the emotional noise drops away. What remains is structure, and structure can be navigated. The realization is quiet, almost disappointing. You recognize that judgment does not wait for explanation. It forms first, then searches for confirmation. That is why speaking faster never restores ground. You are arguing inside a frame that has already been set. Niccolò Machiavelli understood this without romance. He observed that power is assigned by perception before merit is assessed. Those who believe the order can be reversed misunderstand how humans decide who leads and who adjusts. Perception establishes rank. Rank determines whose words matter. This is the pivot. Not outrage, not resolve, awareness. You notice how often position is decided without conversation. Someone enters a room and is immediately deferred to. Another enters and is immediately explained over. No one votes. No one announces the hierarchy. It is sensed. And once sensed, it is enforced quietly by everyone present. Machiavelli decoded this as the hidden law beneath civility. People comply with certainty long before they evaluate correctness. They do not follow truth. They follow coherence. And coherence belongs to the one who does not rush. When you were overlooked, it was not because you lacked value. It was because value was not the deciding factor in that moment. What mattered was who appeared settled, who seemed unaffected, who did not signal need. The one who looked as though they would be fine either way gained leverage without asking. This is where emotional victimhood dissolves, not because harm was imaginary, but because its mechanism becomes visible. You were not targeted. You were sorted. Machiavelli observed that those who remain calm under judgment often rise after it. Those who react are locked into the position they tried to escape. Reaction confirms relevance of the judgment. Non-reaction forces re-evaluation. You begin to see how quickly explanation hands control away. The moment you say, "Let me clarify," you accept that clarification is required. The moment you say, "That's not what I meant," you grant authority to the interpretation you are resisting. Machiavellian rules reveal that resistance, when verbalized, strengthens the frame you oppose. The turning point is internal. You stop asking how to be understood and start noticing how understanding is granted. You stop measuring fairness and start measuring leverage. This is not cynicism. It is accuracy. Machiavelli once said in effect that men judge more by the eye than by the hand. Appearance, posture, restraint. These are the currencies exchanged before words are priced. When you grasp this, you stop negotiating from emotion. You also see why moral appeals fail in moments of imbalance. Morality is persuasive only among equals. When position is uncertain, morality sounds like pleading. Machiavelli understood this distinction clearly. He separated virtue from strategy, not because virtue is useless, but because it must be timed. This awareness changes how you interpret silence. Silence is no longer absence. It is signal. It tells others you are not scrambling to restore comfort. It suggests you are observing, and observation unsettles those who expected reaction. Machiavelli captured this in his analysis of courts, where the most dangerous figure was often the quiet one. Not the loud accuser, not the eager defender. The one who let others speak themselves into positions they could not later retreat from. The shift from emotion to strategy does not make you colder. It makes you steadier. You are no longer consumed by the need to respond immediately. You recognize that timing, not volume, determines outcome. Machiavelli figured this out, watching how quickly narratives solidify. Once a story forms fighting, it directly strengthens it. Letting it sit unanswered forces it to justify itself. Most stories collapse under their own weight when not fed. This is where control returns, not outwardly, inwardly. You stop burning energy on correction and start conserving it for position. You do not confront the imbalance. You outgrow it. The realization does not demand action yet. It demands restraint. And restraint is not passive. It is preparation. Once you see the rules clearly, you no longer need to rush. The next move belongs to whoever can wait without flinching. And waiting done correctly changes everything that follows. The shift becomes visible the moment restraint replaces reflex. You notice it when a comment is made, and you do not correct it. When an assumption is placed on you, and you let it stand. When silence appears, and you do not rush to fill it. The room adjusts before you do anything else, not because you asserted dominance, but because you removed access. Machiavelli discovered that restraint protects position more reliably than reaction ever could. Reaction exposes motive. Restraint conceals it. And what remains concealed cannot be easily managed by others. This is the first protective principle. Silence reclaims narrative control. When you explain, you extend the conversation downward. When you pause, you force others to decide whether they are prepared to carry their judgment alone. Most are not. They retreat internally, recalculating what they assumed they knew. You see this in small exchanges. Two people are questioned. One rushes to clarify. The other remains composed. Attention shifts subtly toward the one who did not rush, not because they were right, but because they were settled. Machiavellian rules reveal that settlement signals authority before correctness ever enters the equation. The second principle follows naturally. Visibility must be controlled. Constant presence dulls impact. Immediate availability teaches others to treat your time as flexible. Machiavelli observed that influence erodes when access is unlimited. Scarcity, even mild, restores gravity. Consider the difference between the person who always responds and the one who responds selectively. The first is appreciated. The second is consulted. Appreciation fades quickly. Consultation endures. Machiavelli understood this distinction while watching trusted advisors lose relevance simply by being too reachable. Emotional restraint forms the third layer of protection, not because emotions are weakness, but because reactions reveal where leverage exists. When a remark unsettles you visibly, it teaches others how to move you. When nothing surfaces, the lesson is reversed. Machiavelli captured this when he noted that those who appear unmoved under pressure are assumed to be beyond it. Calm does not need to announce itself. It radiates. And once others believe you are difficult to disturb, they approach differently. The fourth principle dismantles a common illusion: respect does not follow explanation. It precedes it. Words land only after position is accepted. Speaking too soon places your words beneath the judgment you are trying to escape. Machiavelli once said in effect that authority must be felt before it is heard. This is why the same sentence carries different weight depending on who delivers it and when. Timing is not etiquette. It is hierarchy. Kindness without boundaries forms the fifth illusion. It feels virtuous. It often becomes utility. When goodness is predictable, it is managed. When it is measured, it is valued. Machiavelli figured this out, observing rulers who believed generosity guaranteed loyalty. It did not. It guaranteed expectation. The protective adjustment is subtle. You do not withdraw kindness. You limit it. You choose when it appears. This transforms goodwill from a habit into a resource. Others notice the shift without being told. The sixth principle is withdrawal, not as punishment, but as recalibration. When you step back quietly, dynamics reveal themselves. Who reaches? Who adjusts? Who grows uncomfortable? Machiavelli observed that absence often clarifies position faster than presence ever could. Withdrawal does not require explanation. Explanation would defeat its purpose. The space you leave behind does the work. It invites others to feel the weight of what they assumed would always be there. Each of these principles functions without confrontation. That is their strength. They protect internal sovereignty while allowing the external world to rearrange itself naturally. You are not forcing change. You are permitting reality to respond to your restraint. Machiavelli understood this deeper than most. He did not advocate noise. He documented consequence. Those who mastered silence shaped outcomes without appearing to act. Those who rushed to justify themselves remained busy and exposed. What emerges now is not aggression. It is composure. You stop signaling urgency. You stop broadcasting availability. You stop correcting every misalignment in real time. And slowly, others begin to recalibrate how they approach you. Nothing dramatic announces the change. There is no confrontation, no declaration, just a gradual return of distance. And distance, once restored, becomes leverage. This is not the end of the adjustment. It is the foundation. Once restraint becomes natural, something else follows an internal sovereignty that no longer depends on response. And that shift quietly prepares the next movement without requiring a single word. What follows restraint is not dominance. It is sovereignty. You begin to notice a quieter shift inside yourself before anything changes around you. The urge to respond loosens. The pressure to be understood fades. You no longer feel compelled to correct every misalignment as it appears. Not because you have given up, but because you have stopped confusing reaction with control. Machiavelli observed that true authority stabilizes inwardly before it ever appears outwardly. Those who rely on constant engagement remain entangled. Those who disengage selectively regain position without confrontation. This is not withdrawal from the world. It is withdrawal from unnecessary exposure. Internal sovereignty means your emotional state is no longer a public space. Praise does not soften you. Criticism does not accelerate you. Silence does not provoke you. Each of these once had access. Now they require permission. Machiavellian rules reveal that permission is the real currency of power. Whoever decides what affects them decides the terms of engagement. When you stop reacting automatically, others lose the ability to steer you through implication or tone. They must become explicit, and explicit moves are easier to see and manage. This is why emotional discipline feels unsettling to those around you. They are accustomed to feedback. When it disappears, they do not know where they stand. Machiavelli captured this dynamic while studying negotiations that stalled, not because of conflict, but because one side refused to reveal its internal state. You may notice subtle tests, a sharper comment, a delayed response, an unexpected compliment. These are not random. They are attempts to locate your pressure points. When nothing surfaces, the tests lose purpose. Machiavelli figured this out by watching how quickly manipulators retreat when their usual tools fail. Internal sovereignty also reframes rejection. When access to you is limited, rejection no longer carries the same weight. It becomes information, not injury. Machiavelli once said that rejection is positional, not personal. Those who understand this do not chase after closed doors. They note who closed them and move accordingly. This reframing is critical. When you stop interpreting rejection as loss, you stop bleeding power through explanation. You do not rush to repair. You do not demand clarity. You observe, and observation restores balance. Machiavelli understood this while analyzing rulers who survived exile. They did not beg for return. They withdrew, consolidated, and reappeared when conditions shifted. Their absence created speculation. Their silence created gravity. Their return recalibrated the field without argument. Another layer settles in. You stop trying to be liked universally. Approval becomes optional. This does not make you indifferent. It makes you selective. Machiavellian rules reveal that broad approval often comes at the cost of sharp edges. And sharp edges are what maintain boundaries. You may notice fewer words leaving your mouth, fewer explanations, fewer emotional signals. Conversations become shorter, cleaner. When you speak, you do not preface. When you listen, you do not interrupt. This economy of expression is not emptiness. It is precision. Machiavelli decoded this precision as the mark of those who cannot be rushed. They are not slow. They are deliberate. And deliberateness forces others to adjust tempo. When you set the pace, you influence outcome without commanding it. Internally, something finalizes. You stop measuring yourself through immediate feedback. You stop seeking reassurance that your position is intact. You know when to engage and when to remain still. That knowledge does not announce itself. It stabilizes you. Machiavelli captured this stability as the difference between those who survive turbulence and those consumed by it. The unshakable are not unmoved because they feel nothing. They are unmoved because they choose when feeling becomes action. This is where the transformation becomes self-sustaining. You no longer need rules to remind you. Restraint becomes instinct. Silence becomes comfortable. Distance becomes functional. Others will sense it without being able to name it. Interactions will change subtly, not because you demanded respect, but because you stopped offering access freely. And once access is controlled, everything else aligns around it. There is no need to accelerate from here. The ground is set. What follows is not escalation, but consolidation. When internal sovereignty is established, the world responds in quieter, more predictable ways, and that predictability belongs to whoever no longer needs to chase it.